For the first trip, let's go to Cape Town. One thing you notice at Hong Kong airport is the number of taxis. You can probably count several hundred of these red taxis. And the reason for that is that people in Hong Kong heavily rely on public transport. Now, I would recommend, instead of taking a taxi, to go for the Airport Express. It is quicker and is also much cheaper. The third way you can get to the airport would be by bus. That's a little bit slower than the Airport Express, but you're going to save even more. We flew with Singapore Airlines, departing at 3:45 in the afternoon. It's a 4-hour flight, which I think is a very good time to depart, because then you can have your dinner at the regular time. And the airplane on the inside, as you can see, it's quite pleasant. There's enough space between people, enough legroom, comfortable seats. And as for the meal, you can probably guess that I've ordered a vegan meal, as I usually do. And the meal on this particular flight was pretty decent, apart from the white rice, but that's what you can expect on flights. I've never been able to book red or brown rice on a flight, but there was a nice mix of vegetables, and it was just about enough for dinner. And what I liked the most about it is the view. As you can see, we flew around sunset, and seeing sunsets from above the clouds is quite amazing. So that's what I enjoyed the most about the dinner on Singapore Airways. Perhaps the best thing about flying with Singapore Airways is landing at Singapore Airport, which is the world's #1 airport. There are various cinemas, and there's even a butterfly garden, which is one of the places we visited. As you can see, there are various species of butterflies. Now, we landed after dark, so it's not the best time to go to the butterfly garden, but nevertheless, we managed to see a number of butterflies, and a few of them were actually flying around, and we managed to get a short clip of one of them. Another good thing about Singapore Airport is that you are able to shower at a very reasonable price, not very far from the butterfly garden. Also in Terminal 3, you can get a shower at the Ambassador Lounge at 20 Singapore dollars, which is about $15 US. For this price, you can spend about half an hour in the lounge, and they also provide you with a towel, shower gel, shampoo, and there are also hair dryers. If you have a bit more time at Singapore Airport, there's a lot more to do. As with most airports, there are a lot of shops, and as I mentioned, there are cinemas. But we only transited for a few hours, so we headed straight to the gate after we took a shower. And one of the interesting things I noticed there was the way they transport the trolleys. It's some sort of a vehicle, and then there's a person operating it, as you can see in the clip here. They've got a whole lot of trolleys in a row, and then they transport it to a designated pickup point. So if you ever wondered about Singapore Airport, it's certainly worth it to transit there. And if you're wondering between Singapore Airways and a different airline, I certainly recommend giving Singapore Airways a try. The flight from Singapore to Johannesburg departed around 1:45 in the morning. And this is quite a long flight of 10 hours and 40 minutes. And the plan was to get some sleep on this flight. However, I was seated next to somebody who knew a person I used to play chess with, Konrad Scheffler. And he said Konrad was actually his best friend in primary school. So we had quite an interesting conversation, especially since this person was a pilot for one of the other airlines. It was my very first time to meet a pilot in person and then to sit next to him for such a long flight. So we had quite a long chat, and after a couple of hours of talking, we eventually fell asleep. And we arrived in Johannesburg on time. And for me, it was quite an emotional experience to land there, because this was the first time I landed in Johannesburg since my grandparents died. The last time I landed there, all four of them were still alive, and the last one of them went to rest in her grave in 2017. The other times I visited South Africa, I took a different airline, and I did not have to transit in Johannesburg. But the transit there is actually very short. It's simply to drop off passengers and to clean the airplane. So after about 1.5 hours, we were off and into the air again on our way to Cape Town. And from Johannesburg to Cape Town takes less than 2 hours. But there is a very beautiful view if you can have a window seat. And since so many passengers got off, both myself and Alison decided to move to window seats so we could have a better view. And as you can see, we were above the clouds again, so quite a nice view to start with. And later on as well, spectacular views from the airplane. And the most splendid, of course, is as you approach Cape Town. As you're enjoying a bird's eye view of Cape Town, I'll tell you a little bit about the city and its history. Cape Town is the legislative capital of South Africa. It has just under 5 million people with a population density of around 1,500, which is about a tenth of Quarry Bay, the area where we live in Hong Kong. Now, Cape Town has quite a long history. It's the oldest city in South Africa, and the first European to land there or to go there by ship was Bartholomew Dias back in 1488. There's also an Afrikaans song that we used to sing about him, Bartholomew Dias, as he's known in Afrikaans, and he named it the Cape of Storms. But some years later, in 1497, a Portuguese explorer, Vasco da Gama, renamed it the Cape of Good Hope. In 1510, there was a battle of Salt River. And in the 16th century, there were a lot of French, Danish, Dutch, and English, but mainly Portuguese ships that regularly continued to stop over in Cape Town, especially in Table Bay. Then came the Dutch period in 1652, when Jan van Riebeeck and other employees of the United East India Company set off for Cape Town. Now, very interesting about van Riebeeck, he's a very well-known historic figure in South Africa. We learn about him in history, both in primary school and high school. There's a statue of him in Cape Town. There's also a Jan van Riebeeck building in Pretoria. He appeared also on the old South African coins, as well as the banknotes. At least we thought it was him who appeared on these banknotes and coins. But it later turned out that there was a very big mix-up. The face, as you can see, on the 5 rand note that we thought was that of Jan van Riebeeck, actually turned out to be a completely different person called Bartholomew Vermeyden. How the mix-up happened, nobody's really sure, but it was quite remarkable that for decades, everyone believed that the face on the money is that of Jan van Riebeeck. So it shows you that sometimes you may believe something for a very long time when it's actually not true. A lot of people are still in denial about this, but the face that we have on the old coins and on the old banknotes is not that of Jan van Riebeeck, but that of Bartholomew Vermeyden. Now, as we continue about the history, the British later captured Cape Town in 1795, but in the early 1800s, the Dutch got it back. And there's even a song by a famous Afrikaans singer, Anton Goosen, singing about that period. Die Kaap is weer Hollands, that means the Cape is Dutch again. That was in 1803. But it didn't last very long, and eventually the British took over again. And South Africa was a British colony until the 20th century, when it became independent. And it was also in the 1960s when South Africa adopted its own monetary system, switching from the pound system to the rand system. And to give you an idea, in today's terms, if you're from the UK, you can get about 22 rand for 1 British pound. Whereas in the old days, when they just switched over, it was 2 rand for 1 British pound. So that gives you some idea about the history of Cape Town. It is also known as the most beautiful city in South Africa. And of course, Table Mountain is one of the top 10 tourist attractions on the whole African continent. So that's definitely something to visit if you ever decide to go to Cape Town. We've been there during our last visit. We've taken the cable car up to Table Mountain, and that is the best and the quickest way, also the safest way to reach the top. But this time we're not going to do it again. We have a lot of other exciting plans, and you can join us in the next episode to see what we're going to do on our first day in the Western Cape.